You have to spend an awful lot of time looking at what you can leverage, why you should leverage it, and then more importantly, why it's going to add value to a consumer audience, customer base that is yet either unmet or unparalleled.
Welcome to the Superior Digital Show. My name is Jonathan DeCollibus, and you all know Mike Henebery from our first podcast together. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, you'll see a link in the description below. It was a tremendous hit. We had so much positive feedback from the first episode that we did together that we decided to bring Mike back on to do a series of podcasts together on his new book, Wrestling with Unicorns. And today we bring in the magnificent, the excellent Stephen Sumner, his colleague, Mike's friend, someone who has collaborated with Mike on his new book, Wrestling with Unicorns, specifically on the chapter on organic growth. And you guys are going to be very fortunate to spend some time together today with Stephen, as I am, because Stephen is a prolific entrepreneur. He's a prolific business advisor. His title is very fascinating to me, which I saw on his LinkedIn. It said Chief Change Maker. And he has a very strong track record in transforming brands, exploding growth. Just to give you just a few pieces of context so that you can really take what he says in terms of the authority, the weight behind what he says. He migrated 24 different mail order businesses into a single e-commerce conglomerate platform, creating $1 billion in revenue. That's a phenomenal, if I stop right there, that's enough context to drive the authority there for you all. Number two, he has rebranded, repositioned, and re-engineered what is now the second largest shapewear brand in the USA. And he grew the fifth largest email marketing company in the UK purely, this is what I love, purely by accident, and then he sold it. So again, prolific. He's built numerous successful international businesses in different retail and marketing sectors. Stephen has delivered increases in conversions from 3% to 19% for Entertainment Magpie. And he has reduced paid media spend for some of his clients, reduced by 75% while increasing ROI by 20%. That's magic. And I can't wait to dive into some of this. And on top of all this, he has built and sold a number of his own data and MarTech companies. So I love what Stephen says on his LinkedIn. He says, I don't just talk about growth, I guarantee to deliver it. Those are strong words from a strong man. Guys, this is going to be a chance of a lifetime to get to spend time here with these two gentlemen. Let's dive on in. So Mr. Stephen Sumner, thanks so much for being with us today. Mike, thank you for being with us again today. Stephen, if I could direct the first question to you, what would you say it is like building the fifth largest email marketing company in the UK purely by accident and then selling it?
So a lot of people ask the same question and that's why I'm fairly honest that it was purely by accident. We didn't set out to do that. We actually set out to solve a problem. And you've got to go back in the day. So 20 years ago, everybody sort of today accepts that, having an email database is sort of the bread and butter of your business, as long as you can use it on a permission basis. But 20-something years ago, most businesses that were sort of trying to find a way around this thing called the internet, and in particular something called e-commerce, they weren't really focused on collecting email addresses. I just happened to be working with the largest direct home shopping company in the UK, and they had on an average month about 2 million customers spending money with them. So the strategy at that stage was to migrate as many of those people into the online space as quickly as we could. And in order to do that, we needed a way to communicate. So we looked at email, and we weren't really collecting email addresses. I think the business at the time had about 5,000 email addresses, purely by customer services, if you like, responding to people. So it wasn't really a strategic part of the overall business. What I looked at was that if I wanted to migrate 2 million customers over into the commerce online space, we needed to really sort of up our game from an email collection perspective. So we sort of laid that out. That was the goal. That was the sort of strategy for that particular part of the growth of the business. The issue that I faced was that whilst we had a huge opportunity, we also had a huge problem. There was very few businesses that were around back in the day that were actually doing anything like you see today in terms of volume email capability. So we ran a bit of a beauty parade and got a number of, I would say, early stage startups that were looking at this space to come in. And, you know, some of them were quite good, some of them were interesting, but none of them really got the potential for email, and none of them really sort of understood what my challenges were. And that is, you know, the first thing I needed to do, as I've said earlier, is I was looking to migrate as many of those 2 million offline customers to sort of use the online platform as quickly as possible. Therefore, I needed something that was scalable, reliable, but also cost effective. Virtually everybody that presented into me always came at it from a cost perspective. And sorry, I've got to do the sort of the UK pound to the US dollar. So at the time, they were pricing their model based on the cost of putting a stamp on an envelope, and coming to me say, well, you know, based on your mailings, we can save you, you know, 10 cents or, you know, 5p or whatever it was. And I said to them, look, guys, you just really do need to sit down and do some maths here. If I'm going to be migrating 2 million people into the online space, those numbers are not going to stack up. So we need something that's scalable, but we also need something that's actually aimed at a market where email collection, use and delivery is going to be where the near future sits. Cut a very long story short, we couldn't find anybody. So what I did was, and I'm no technical person, I'm actually a sort of a retail multi-channel marketing guy, but I've been around in the space for long enough to be able to sort of whiteboard what the issue is, what I'm looking for, and the type of solution that I wanted to do. So ironically, it was my very first foray into product development from a technical perspective, just purely off the back of a whiteboard. And inevitably what I did was I got a couple of software development companies in and took them through the whiteboard scenario and said, look, you know, here's the challenge, here's the opportunity, here's what we need. And if you can deliver it, we'll write you a 3-year contract, but we're not going to fund the development. And that takes a brave move from any young software development company to hold their hand up and say, okay, we'll do that because we see the same opportunity in the future as you. And if you're going to underwrite this with a 3-year contract, we'll go for it. And eventually that's what they delivered. They delivered it at fractions of a cent, rather than where the rest of the industry was sort of focusing on silly cost per thousand. So that was great, and that sort of started to move the client's business along, which is the business that you mentioned earlier, where we grew their online business from a standing start, literally nothing, to over $1 billion worth of revenues across multiple different trading fascias. So when I came out of that business, the guys who had actually developed the software, the email software platform, said, this is great, we've got a great contract with you guys, but we're struggling to sort of really make any traction in the marketplace. What do you think we should be doing differently? I won't bore you with all of the details, but I actually ended up buying the company as it was then. And so we structured a deal. And what I recognized that if I was operating in what was then the biggest, best, and the bellwether for home shopping in the UK, and they had the same sort of problems most other businesses out there would probably having the same issues. So what we did was, and this is where it became by accident, as I say, we built the platform, we knew it worked. I took the view that whilst the rest of the industry was focusing on price, I was going to focus on knowledge and intelligence, because as an operator in that space, I didn't just want something low cost that I could bombard people and spam people with lots of different emails. I wanted a system that allowed me to create different messages for customers who are at different parts of the journey. So those that are maybe just getting to know us is a slightly different story than a customer that's been with you for quite some time. And today it's all commonplace, this stuff. This is, everybody, well, that's fairly common practice. Well, it was, and I have a view that for something to become common sense, it has to become common practice in the first instance. So we were very fortunate in the first instance that I knew what people were pricing their email system, if you like, at. But I also knew that they weren't offering the data intelligence services that sort of said, okay, if you structure the email campaigns in such a way, we've got all the analytics in the background that tells you how those campaigns have been doing. I very quickly picked up that actually by positioning the business in a slightly different way, which was around the analytics and the intelligence to improve your campaigns, I went to market on a promise of increasing your revenues by a minimum of 30%. And nobody could believe that this was possible. And eventually it won people over for the fact that, we could guarantee that we would increase revenues by an additional 30%. And we did that because we segmented the audiences. We personalized a lot of the communications. We personalized a lot of the product promotions that were going in. So we were doing all the sort of stuff that everybody expects today, but they weren't doing it then. And so what we did was when we went and spoke to some of the biggest and best retailers, those that were getting into the online space, we went in and presented to them the intelligence around the analytics and just told them that they get the email broadcasts as part of the package. But in order to do that, they'd need to sign a 2-year contract. And that took the business literally from, at the time, we were generating just over £500,000. So whatever the exchange rate would be, so $750,000, I suppose. And within a matter of 18 months to 2 years, we took it to 20 million. And with a very, very healthy bottom line return. And what it taught me was a number of things. One was we'd already invested and built what I felt was a pretty good product. But they weren't getting any traction because they were trying to sell the product and the proposition in the same way that the rest of the industry was, which is on price. And inevitably, if you're going to sell on price, then there's only ever going to be one winner, and it isn't going to be you. So we sort of adapted, adopted, and innovated, and we brought on people into the business that understood the value of personalization, analytics, the data intelligence. And then we ended up building, again by accident, a data warehousing and data intelligence platform off the back of it. And so we ended up getting acquired. I'll be honest with you here. I've got relatives out in Vancouver, and we cleared off for 8 weeks. I never used to take any holidays, so I'd take holidays every other year. And we cleared off for 8 weeks during the summer. And during that 8 weeks of hiking, golfing, kayaking, just basically lazing around, I just realized at that stage I was getting a little bit bored. The business had moved on. It was doing pretty well. And I got a call from one of our clients. I don't know if you guys in the States will have heard of Harrods, which is the famous luxury department store. So there's a mate of mine there who was a client as well, rang me up and said, I got somebody he knew from a division of Goldman Sachs had got wind of what we were doing and who we were, and we were at the early stages of the growth of email marketing type stuff, but it was the data analytics side of things. Cut a long story short, they contacted me. I went to see them. We had a few conversations, and we ended up agreeing a sale on a handshake. And the idea at that time was to go back playing golf, hiking, kayaking, sailing, and everything else. And that idea lasted for 2 weeks because I get bored easy.
Just if I can do a quick sort of caveat on that, I think that's, one of the interesting pieces of that we've seen with our clients. We've seen some of our clients who've gone through the exit process, and you're exactly right. They have this magnificent plan of they're going to go out and, go yachting around the world and just, take the next 10 years off. And then, 2 weeks later, they're like, hey, I have this great idea for some technology. Why don't we discuss this? And you're like, I thought you were on this yacht vacation for the next 2 years. But like you said, if it's in your blood, it's in your blood. And, if you're a born entrepreneur, then that's it. Mike, if I could just direct something to you. First of all, thanks, Mike, for being back with us today. Just out of curiosity, I think there's something, here that we want to talk about today. And I think Stephen's really put us in the deep end already on this. But, for an SME owner who doesn't know where to begin, who's looking at, these stories that we're hearing here of, exponential growth, this organic growth, creative thinking, taking an idea, turning it around. But as you've very well said, overwhelm can be a big issue with many entrepreneurs today. So, what would you say would be the top 2 to 3 priorities in terms of, getting that organic growth plan in order? And even if you could, to take a step back on that, maybe just to share with people who are not clear on what that term means, the organic growth term means. If you could share that as well, that would be very enlightening, I believe.
Yeah, sure, John. Great to be back. The first thing I start with any business is what's special about the business. And in the private equity world, it's a bit of a blunt tool, but back in the days in the 90s when private equity was first really kicking off in London, we used to talk about businesses making a minimum of a 10% EBITDA, because if your business isn't making 10% at the bottom line, there's got to be some serious reasons as to why not. And really, one of the first questions we would ask a management team, we're coming in with a business plan, perhaps for funding, was what's special about the business? And it seems to me that if a business isn't making a 10% EBITDA margin, it's hard to suggest that it's special. I always look very carefully within the management team itself, and it's hard when a business is starting out. Depending on the scale of the company, at 5 million revenue level, this is harder to have the right management team in place. But by the time you're getting anything close to 10 million in revenues, I think you're looking to have a well-rounded management team in the business, and that means having the right people in the right functions. And as part and parcel of that, of course, you need to have an organic growth plan. What do we mean by that? Well, it's partly what we're here to talk about today, but it's really about how we drive that top line. It could come from new product development. It could come from new service development. It might come from overseas expansion. There's a number of areas where people look to create faster growth. But the bottom line is, of course, you can only do these things if you've got a management team that's passionate and focused. And I always think that the best entrepreneurs have this capability to fight fires, wrestle problems to the floor, and not lose sight of the ultimate goal, and make sure that the people in the business understand what that goal is, and that they're incentivized and motivated to meet those goals.
So when you think about organic growth, so you're saying that we should begin from a top-down perspective, begin with management and then work our way down, versus maybe looking at the people who are actually delivering the service, or manufacturing the product, or building some of these lower tier type of approaches. You're saying start at the top. If there's a problem with your ROI, if there's a problem with your annual recurring revenue, then that's a management problem. That's an entrepreneur problem. That's not something that's lower down on the chain of command. Is that a correct understanding?
I'm not sure there's a one-size-fits-all for this, but usually in business, you've got to do top-down and bottom-up.
Yeah.
But maybe you start with top down, and then that gives you some focus as to where you should be looking bottom up. And it's part of the reason why we've got Stephen here today to go into a little bit more detail about organic growth and how he's driven that in a whole series of businesses, because Stephen is the marketing expert. I guess I'm giving you the perspective of an investor, what we would look for in a management team and in a business. And we always start with the CEO. Has the CEO got experience of managing people, managing assets, and managing cash? Because that's usually a good starting point. What's the track record of the CEO in achieving growth? Has the CEO exited the business before successfully? These are the things a private equity investor is looking for in a business. As for organic growth, I think that's more over to Stephen to go into a bit more detail.
Yeah. I think, we have the terminology of organic growth versus bolt-on versus acquisition. Look, the reality is you've already invested a lot of time, effort, sweat, sleepless nights, whatever it takes to get you to where you need to go to. And today I'm still building another MarTech platform that Mike's working with me on. But a lot of the time, once I'd exited the email business, I'd been called into lots of organizations I'd like to pick your brains type of question, which inevitably then turns into some kind of involved consultancy role, which led me to the States for 2 years, where I then worked with a hosiery and shapewear business and helped to get that to the second largest shapewear brand in the US. And we did that primarily through organic growth. And equally, if you go back to the message and the story that I mentioned before on the email side of things, all of that was organic growth. And organic growth primarily is how can you sweat what you've already got to create new opportunities that are solving problems better than either your competitor or solving a problem that hasn't yet got a solution that's out there. And by definition, virtually every entrepreneur is very creative. Mike alludes to the fact that, over a period of time, you need to be good at cash management. Well, when I set out in business, I never realized I'd have to become a tax expert, an accountancy expert, a cash flow expert, an employee, HR, personnel, all of these things that you pick up and you have to learn. And today, I think the pressure is even greater on businesses because of the medium that most businesses operate in, which is online. There is this perception that, there's this huge team that's behind you. So you've already invested a lot of the time and the effort. And organic growth for me is one of the first things I do when I go into any business, whether it's my own business or somebody else's business. I'm very inquisitive to know, first of all, why you did what you did. And for a lot of businesses I speak to, what they used to do doesn't seem to be working for them anymore. So they've hit a plateau. And a lot of it isn't necessarily because their product is saturated, the market is saturated, there's no more customers. That is not necessarily the case. The reality is, a bit like the email conundrum, what people were buying yesterday is not necessarily what they will buy today. So sometimes it's a fairly simple thing down to maybe just repositioning how you are communicating what your offer is into the marketplace. In other cases, it's a question of saying, okay, well, we now have this asset. And again, I'd use the email analogy. So the asset there was we could deliver huge volumes of broadcast emails, but the output from that was all the data and the intelligence. Well, that wasn't being valued in particular internally inside the business until I'd taken a look at it and said, well, look, if this was me, wanting to buy something, and you were telling me about all of the information that you can give me that actually helps me to grow that additional 30%, I'm all ears. And I think that those are the sorts of things that a lot of younger businesses tend to not think about. My experience is that you stick with what you know, which is great, but the problem is that you're just continuing to try and grow what you know rather than stand back. And the greatest businesses that do grow are led by people who have got a bit like me, they're very inquisitive. They've got a change sort of mindset. They're forever hungry to find out and learn new things and talk about, and they're quite open. The ones that I see that are really having major problems, and in some cases are a basket case, it's blatantly obvious within the first 30 minutes of speaking to the team, if you like, the management team, that the one thing that they don't have is an open mindset. And so I tend not to work with those people, but I have been involved in quite a few businesses where the business itself has in fact hit its peak. It would need huge reinvestment in a variety of different things, investment in skills, people, maybe some degree of technology, maybe some degree of infrastructure, but investment overall. And, I've got in and looked at those businesses, and I have a saying, which is on my LinkedIn profile, is that sometimes it's easier to give birth than it is to raise the dead. And if any of you guys have ever read or listened to the Kodak story, which, Kodak basically killed their own business, because at a time when everything was moving to digital, Kodak chose to optimize what it already had to encourage you and me to still take digital photographs, but go and get them printed somewhere. And actually, consumer behavior was going the opposite way. So, as Mike said, there's no sort of one size fits all, but I'm a guy that literally obsesses why a consumer or a client would choose somebody else's product or brand or service over yours. And so I spend an awful lot of time trying to understand the why. And so when I talk to owner, managers, entrepreneurs, they can tell me about the why they started their business, why they got the results that they've been getting, but they struggle to tell me why they're not getting those results any longer. And that's primarily because market behavior has changed. Now, I'm not going to do the COVID thing because that really has kick-started transformation for every business. But in reality, change very rarely happens internally until there's an external reason for that change to kick in. The really bright guys and girls that make businesses happen don't become too obsessed about their internal view of what their product, service, and opportunity and offer is. They keep a very close eye that's out there, but they also have an innate ability to be creative with the products and services that they've got, and also to unleash the right people in businesses. And you mentioned before in my title, which is Chief Change Maker. I go into loads of those businesses, large and small businesses, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but when you go into a business and you want to get something done, who organises the telephones? Who do I go to sort of get this thing sorted? And everybody knows somebody who gets stuff done. Everybody. Yet what they don't do is set these guys up as a parallel sort of board, if you like, or a parallel team to go, right, okay, what I want you guys to do, in addition to the day job, is have a think about, if an entrepreneurial business outside was looking at us today, how would they win business from us? And what could we do with what we've already got to make sure that we're staying ahead of that and innovate ourselves? And so change makers are in every business. We just happen to be the people that we constantly accept that they're the go-to people when we want to get something done. But we don't engage them. We don't sort of encourage them. We don't unleash that power that they've got. And once you can do that, you really do start to uncover some real superpowers within the business. And whilst we built the email business, to be honest, the data side of it was my idea. The delivery of that came through the teams that were in the business that then sort of ran with it and pulled it all together in a way that allowed us to scale the business very quickly.
If I can just step in there, John, it's something we pick up on in the book, actually, that this whole area, it's really about the culture of the business. A business has to have a culture of innovation if it's going to be developing new products, new services, reacting to changes in the market. And it's down to the CEO or the owners of the business, the owner managers of the business to drive that culture of innovation, encourage people within the business to be thinking about how things should evolve. And it was really, I think, only as recently as the 1980s that people started looking at new product development as being a thing, where there was research going into it and organizations were set up to study, what new product development was all about. We talk about it in the book. But essentially, when you boil it down, all the advice really comes down to having a culture of innovation in the business. And that can only be driven by this mindset that Stephen was referring to. And it reminded me actually of a chairman I worked with on a deal, a guy called Hamdi Konga, who's been a very successful guy actually, both in North America and the UK, often in industrial businesses. And he said to me, Mike, the mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. And this is really all about having that innovative culture within the business. You've got to encourage people to be open-minded and not approach everything with a closed mind.
So I have a couple of approaches that I take when I go into businesses, John, that are looking to better understand how to deliver on a growth strategy. And I divide it quite simply, albeit there's a lot of complexity underneath. And the complexity covers lots of things within the business that we haven't really got time to go into today. But I focus on two things. And this is my takeaway for anybody that's watching this, is you need two strategies. One is a leverage strategy and the other is a build strategy. And I often see businesses jumping to the build piece before they really understand what it is that they're leveraging. So it creates internal friction and internal confusion. So, a leverage and build strategy do go hand in hand, but you have to spend an awful lot of time looking at what you can leverage, why you should leverage it, and then more importantly, why it's going to add value to a consumer audience, customer base that is yet either unmet or unparalleled. Maybe, you're just going to do something better than everybody else can do because you've got ahead of the game. So leverage and build are a very significant part of my approach, my process, and the way that I will work with businesses. That's what we did with the shapewear business in the US. We took what they already had. We looked at some of the key components around innovations that they had that they weren't really talking about. And we effectively repositioned them into a fashion lifestyle business for women's shapewear. And they're second to the largest shapewear brand in the world at the moment, which is Spanx. But every bit of research that we did around Spanx said they're fantastic, but my word, are they uncomfortable? Yet every bit of research that we did about this particular client's product said, yeah, they're not very fashionable, but my God, aren't they comfortable? So we basically took that as the shape, and if you excuse the pun, and moved that forward and repositioned, re-engineered, and basically moved their entire business online, which helped with some efficiencies. But the positioning of the brand in relation to the problems and the solutions that it was bringing to a marketplace allowed them to. I mean, they were actually about 12 months away from going under, to be honest. I was called in by VCs to sort of have a look at it. But that's where they are today. So we went in with a leverage. So what can we leverage from the existing business, and then how are we going to build on top of that? And there's a lot that's involved in it. But ultimately, if you get it right, and you engage with your change makers, there's a good chance that you'll come out the other side probably a more profitable and healthier business than the one that you've already built.
Do you believe that you can build change makers, or is that something that is innate in their nature?
So my view on that is fairly straightforward. Anybody that you see in a business, and it doesn't have to be the CEO, but anybody that's risen in the ranks in that business or in any other business, they grew a little business. It could be a market stall and they've grown it into a store. It could be a small garage and they've grown it into a bigger dealership, whatever. They all have those inherent traits. And, let's get real. 97% of the population wants a job.
Yeah.
They work for somebody else because they believe and they're conditioned to think that that is security.
Yep.
3% that are prepared to do what the other 97% aren't prepared to do. That's not derogatory to people that want a job.
Yeah.
That's the way that the world works. What you're looking for, and they sort of virtually put their hands up in every business. They're the people that people go to ask how to get something done. Those are the first people I go and talk to when I walk into any business, and I sit them around a table with a cup of coffee, and they're the guys that will tell you, well, if it was done this way, or it wasn't done that way, yeah, of course you're going to get the complainers. But bear in mind that I'm talking to the people who I've already assessed because somebody's told me this is the person you speak to get something done. Who's the greatest person in our customer services department? And if I want to get X, Y, and Z done, you need to go and speak to Mary or to Matthew or to whoever it is. And they will have those inherent traits. And therefore, it's a great place to start because you're not going to recruit in the marketplace. You utilize the things that you've got. Equally, it carries gravitas. When you want to move the change dial forward, the rest of the team are listening to the people who they already go to for how do I get things done. So it actually adds quite a lot of value and weight towards the argument. So it's not just the CEO, it's not just, the leadership team that's saying this. We're saying this collectively and we've already sort of thought about it. So it's quite a good process to go through. But yeah, anybody that's in business and made it up the corporate ladder, as I will always say, that they started out and will continue to be a change maker. Unfortunately, once they get to the lofty heights of seniority, a lot of them tend to forget that they don't need to be change makers. They rely on other people to be change makers, and therefore they become redundant because they're not delivering the value that everybody thought they were going to do.
Most entrepreneurs have probably read the E-Myth, Michael Gerber talking about, work on the business, not in the business. And I think a lot of this vernacular it's almost cliche to the point that, we believe, okay, yeah, this is how we're supposed to work in systems and analyze things. But I mean, practically, from a real perspective, I mean, how do you actually pull the entrepreneur out of the whirlwind, out of the day-to-day of your putting out fires and dealing with all the overwhelm and the project management and all these types of items that they have on their mind? How do you pull them out of that and get them to focus on these types of questions? What's our advantage? How can we create an advantage? How can we leverage something and build something? I'm just curious, how do you do that? Because I find that myself personally to be almost impossible to do, and I know many other entrepreneurs as well struggle with that. How do you solve that?
So Mike will probably have a hell of a lot more experience around this than me, but my personal view is that a lot of the times people like you and me, when you're front and center, you're the tax advisor, you're the business development person, you're the product development, whoever, and it's coming at you from all sides. And the reality is nobody knows your business better than you. And that's the dangerous thought process to get to. Once you've built it or got it to a stage where, the revenues are coming in, the recurring revenues that are coming through, I got out of my email business for very selfish reasons. We had 40 people on the payroll. I wasn't enjoying the buzz, let's say. the business was ticking along very nicely, and so on and so on. I think that not enough support, if you like, is given to the entrepreneurial leader who sits most of the time in a very lonely place. They're the guys and girls that have probably had to put their houses up for collateral to keep the business going. At times when even the employees won't know how difficult things have been. But nobody really sits down or takes the entrepreneurial leader, if you like, through the Q&A that says, where does this need to go to? What is it if you sort of was to spend 5 minutes, and don't spend longer than 5 minutes, because if you do, you're overthinking it. You have 5 minutes to write down, where do you want this to be in a month or 2 months or 2 years? What is it that you're looking for? And every entrepreneurial leader will tell you they want to make a load of money, they want to get out and they want to go and live the high life. Well, I think we've already covered that one. If you're an entrepreneur, the fact is that if you make the money by selling the business in the right way, it opens up those choices for you to be able to do it. And most entrepreneurs I know, and I can only speak from personal perspective, is I've always got an itch that I need to scratch. And I thought I'd got out. I went and worked with some amazing companies, with some amazing people. And the business that Mike's working with me on at the moment came about as a result of me identifying yet another huge change in behavior that had an unmet solution. And if we get time, we'll probably touch on that a little bit later. But yeah, I think for me, write it down, work out what it is that you want, and then go and speak to somebody and surround yourself with the right kind of people. People like Mike, great asset to sit there and say, right, here's what ideally I would like to happen. But at some stage, you've got to accept the fact that if you keep doing what you're going to keep doing, nothing's going to change. So therein lies madness.
I guess I was bound to say this, John, but in a kind of a way, this is why we set up Exit Valhalla, because from listening to guys that I really respect, guys like Frank Kern, who's obviously built up a big consultancy business in the US, and from what I knew about SMEs, from my own experience of funding SMEs for over 25 years, I felt the smaller SME, let's say below $30 million revenue down to $5 million revenue, is somewhat unloved by the consultancy world, should we say. The big consultancies are probably chasing companies with 100 million revenue and above, because they want a $2, $3, $4 million recurring contract. And obviously that's not going to work for a smaller business. And I guess I also saw that there was change, to use Stephen's word, coming technologically, which meant that we could offer this kind of consultancy over these kinds of Zoom calls, even to more than one company at a time, which I know is what Frank's doing. If you're covering a subject which is important to several companies, you can do that simultaneously. So in a kind of a way, that's why we set up Exit Valhalla. We've got clients now on the west coast of the US, in the north of England already. It's kind of demonstrating to me that, I'm operating this from the south of Spain with a company that's registered in Estonia. So, it shows that, this world has become very digital, very international. And in a way, we saw that change coming. And this is why we set up Exit Valhalla, to act as a sounding board, a bit like the chairman. I mentioned that guy, Hamdi Konga, earlier. Hamdi was a chairman, that typical guy that we would bring in to assist the CEO in a business where we were doing a buyout. In that case, it was a company called Olea. It's actually a case study in the book. And the CEO, Mike Blenkinsop, I'm sure will say that having Hamdi Konga there as a sounding board for him made a big difference. And that company more than tripled in revenue during the period of our investment. But Hamdi's experience was very useful for the management team, and we try and provide that from the auspices of our office, because we've got access to people like Ken Lawrence, who's done over 100 exits, masterminded over 100 exits, but also, of course, people like Stephen as well, and some of the other people that crop up as collaborators in the book.
I think there's a common denominator, I think, of what you're both saying here, which is that you need that objectivity to see where the value gap is, to see where the opportunity is. And I find that, just like you would recommend to Stephen, bringing someone like Mike in, bringing someone like you and Stephen to say, okay, here is the bird's eye view. You're in the forest, you're lost in the forest, you don't see the trees. Let's get you into a perspective shift. And again, to use your word, to change. I would probably be so bold as to say that you're not going to see a real change, at least I haven't to my business, a change on, in terms of our output and our market impact without a change in perspective in our leadership. And I mean, that's been constant. Every time that we've seen innovation, it's always come down to that. And I would venture to say it probably is the same across the board, Yeah.
I mean, I'll bring up the email business again, mainly because it's been the topic that's allowed us to guide the conversation today. One of the things that drew me to talking to Mike and others is that when I got involved in the sale for the email business, I sort of went with it. I hadn't really thought about it. The opportunity came up. I can't sit here and say, we'd strategically planned for this exit. I'm sat drinking beer, playing golf, doing not a lot out in Vancouver, and I get a phone call from a mate of mine from Harrods. Of course, you're going to pick the phone up. And I went with it. And the fact that it was a division of Goldman Sachs, I was the ego quite like that. But when I look back, actually, I did it all the wrong way around. I know for a fact that had I surrounded myself with the right people, people that can come in and have another look at my business, act as a champion challenger. And we don't do that sometimes as entrepreneurs because nobody knows our business better than us. It's our baby. We know all about this business. So, how's somebody going to come in and tell us something that we don't already know? Well, that's exactly why you should bring somebody in, not to tell you what you already know, but to sort of try and give you a different perspective on some of the things maybe you hadn't considered. And then, surrounding yourself with people like Mike and, chairman of my business, again, is good to give you a good perspective, but also I'm pretty convinced that if I'd have gone and sought people like Mike, A, I'd have laid the groundwork better, and B, without sounding too greedy, I'd have probably got a lot more money than I did. Was I unhappy? No, of course I wasn't. But, what I'm building at the moment, I want to make sure that I've learned from what I did in the past in order to make sure that it's all good in the future. And I can't remember who said it, but, you're as good as the people that you surround yourself with today. So if you're surrounding yourself with people who are losers, guess what you'll end up being? If you surround yourself with winners and you actually drop the ego and actually are prepared to be open-minded, then chances are that you will deliver on what it is that you're after in a way that suits you, but also in a much happier and peaceful way. I've never been as happy and as peaceful in my business life. It's hectic. I'm building another marketing technology business. I'm still running my consultancy business, and I've got all sorts of other things going on. And my wife constantly reminds me that I was going to take a sabbatical, and it lasted 2 weeks. So I get it. I've been there. I'm still there. I'm in it. But be open and bring people in that will talk to you about things that should make you feel uncomfortable. If they don't make you feel uncomfortable, you're never going to move that dial forward.
Where does this open-mindedness come from? I mean, how do we cultivate that? Because I know that something that you touched on is that there's so much ego in a business. And I think, Mike, I think you probably have seen that quite a bit. I mean, when you're dealing with business owners who say, you know what, I do want to sell. I mean, there's a little bit of ego, I think, in that, saying, I built something here that's fairly valuable. And so, how does one disconnect, from that mentality and enter into that space where they're open-minded enough to do what's intelligent. I think that's what you were saying at the beginning, Stephen, is really, focusing on that knowledge, on that intelligence, rather than just trying to, lead with ego and trying to, push forward in that kind of manner.
Yeah, before Mike jumps in on that, I mean, what I would say is, and it's probably easier to say it than it is for the people that are either watching or listening to this to do, but you have to detach the commercial reality of what you want to achieve from the ego. Now, that's easier said than done, because, when I sold my email business 15 years ago, there was a lot of ego that was there, which is why I didn't do things in the right way. And, the guys at Exit Valhalla allow businesses to get themselves organized, business leaders, business owners to get themselves organized, not from a distraction from doing the day-to-day stuff, but actually, giving them the opportunities to say, well, what else are you leaving on the table for somebody that's going to acquire your business? Because that's equally as important in terms of the valuation that you get. Because if you're going to sit there in front of somebody and say, well, it's all done, thanks, guys, just buy it out, it's recurring revenue, that's great. But actually, a lot of people want to buy a business, not just for the recurring revenues, albeit they're extremely attractive when you get them. But they're interested in businesses because of what's left on the table for them to add value and to grow it even further. Sorry, Mike, I think I jumped in on your answer.
No, not at all, Stephen. I think that's all very good stuff. I'm bound to say this, aren't I? But I guess really what you're touching on with the question, John, is kind of why I wrote the book. And it's, I think, important to emphasize that whilst there's some knowledge from inside my head, what I was really trying to do was also collate the knowledge from the collaborators that have worked with me on this book to try and get something back to SME owner managers, to cause them to ask some of these questions themselves. And that's kind of why I've written this book, and hopefully it'll cause people to think in a different way. And that's really what we're looking to do, to challenge people to think slightly differently about how they prepare their business for that exit, and that it's not just a 3-4 month job to prepare a business for an exit. It's probably an 18-month, 2-year job if you want to do that properly. And as Stephen said, it's a combination of what value you can extract in advance to drive the EBITDA percentage up and get some better organic growth. But of course, you're also looking to guide people to what's still there to be optimized. Because if there's no value left on the table, then people really aren't going to be attracted to buying into the business.
I think as a bit of a follow-up to that, Mike, I think one of the big motivators as well to our audience, too, I think the practical SME owner operator is really, what is the impact of building in the strategic organic growth plan? What is the real world impact? And I know that we've seen this because of your vast career in this space, but what's the actual impact of that onto the actual valuation? I know that, Stephen, you just touched on that a little bit. What does that look like? I mean,
well, it boils down for me to simple mathematics. The vast majority of businesses are going to be valued on 2 or 3 key factors. The first thing is, what's your run rate level of earnings before interest and tax, your EBITDA? What is that run rate level? And then that's going to be multiplied by a number. And that multiple, can vary from 4 up to 18 or even higher in some companies. I remember when I was at Montague Private Equity back in the 90s, they sold a business on 72 times EBIT, which even the Financial Times described as an astonishingly good price. That's the Financial Times getting excited. 72 is a high number, but how do you get a high multiple? You get a high multiple because you've got strong organic growth and projected growth, and because you've got strong defensible EBITDA percentage margins. So really you want to have those margins up between 15 and 20%, but sustainable. That's not easily done. But if you can produce a business which is doing that, or even higher, Stephen's got a business which will be producing EBITDA margins much higher than that. And then you need the growth factor too. And that's why we've challenged people with the book to say, are you thinking about all these things that can drive your growth? International expansion, bolt-on acquisitions, the organic growth, which could be product development, or it could be leveraging existing assets, as Stephen was saying. So there's a whole series of factors which come into exploiting value on a business. But when you boil it down, it's three things. It's what's your run rate EBITDA now at the point of sale? What's the sales growth anticipated over the next couple of years that's visible? And what's that EBITDA margin percentage? These are the things. The companies with high growth and high EBITDA margin percentages are the ones that attract multiples on profits of higher than, let's say, 10 times. If you get up to 72, well done, but anything higher than 10 is pretty good.
This is not pie in the sky. These are, as you said, it's scientific, it's mathematical. You can look at the numbers and, you can talk all you want about hopes and dreams, but these are numbers, and, numbers don't lie. Sort of as a follow-up, Stephen, I saw on your LinkedIn, and I did do a bit of sort of stalking, pre our conversation today just to make sure I was prepared. But I loved what you said on your LinkedIn, which is you said that we should focus our best hours on our best opportunities. And I feel that there's some clarification I would love to get on that. Is I think we all know, okay, if you want to have more time in the day, great, than just work longer hours, delegate better, prioritize, and some of these, general things that we tend to read about. But I guess my question is, and I think you're an expert in this, as Mike is as well, I think, is it understanding how to identify what actually are those biggest opportunities. As an owner operator looking at the landscape today, how do we sift through all the shiny objects that are being thrown our way? Because, for someone like myself, I know I've got a handful of these change makers in my own company. I know that they bring me tons of ideas, and every other day there's a new mind-blowing thing. It's this is gonna take us to the next level. So how do we differentiate, prioritize that?
So a fairly straightforward answer, but as per, there's a lot of intricacies that go on in order to be able to deliver it. But, first of all, as human beings who are entrepreneurs in these businesses, we're used to being very, very busy for all the reasons we discussed before. We start off with a product idea. We think that that's going to work. We work on the product. Then we've got people. Then we've got to be tax efficient. Then we've got all of these demands. And then you've got change makers in your business, and it's great that you've already identified a few. And yes, they will come up with the ideas, but you've got to empower them to sort of come to you with a qualification of what those ideas are, because the danger is the entrepreneur in you wants to take those ideas very quickly, own them, and run with them. And that isn't always the best use of your time. Equally, you're not going to grow as a leader if you're constantly solving everybody else's problems for them. Yes, you've got to lead. Yes, you've got to support. Yes, you have to be there. But the one thing that you've got, and every single person on the planet has got, regardless of their wealth, is a finite use of time. So time is the commodity that over a period of time you should be valuing over anything else. And in order to do that, you do have to take some time out with those key people and actually ask them the question. Throw the question back at your change makers. What do you think I could be doing that's not getting in your way, but actually is helping you to grow as an individual, to add more value to this business, and where do you see those opportunities? And let them come up with those ideas. But let them know that those ideas that have got merit, you're going to let them start to run with them. Effectively, what I used to do was, and we did it on the data side of things, we will have one challenge, and it comes back to this time and efficiency thing. Every business that's out there is constantly trying to get new business, new business, new business, new business. And we get distorted in terms of our time and availability to win new business. And we tend to forget the existing businesses that we've got. And that's organic growth. So the best bit of organic growth is get more out of the existing customers. Bit of a no-brainer. But we do get locked into this, let's get more and more new customers. And business development is an expensive process. It's time consuming, it's resource consuming, it's financial consuming. And a lot of businesses that I've worked with, just trying to give an example of one, was selling solutions at an enterprise level. I won't tell you, it doesn't matter what the product was, but it was effectively selling seat licenses into large enterprises. And when they won a deal, the champagne was out, everybody was backslapping and everything else. And I arrived in the business and said, well, that's an ego trip, guys. Well, how do you mean it's an ego trip? But we sat down, we looked at the numbers, and we looked at the gestation period for targeting the client, seeing the client, wooing the client, doing all of the things that we all know about to eventually getting it over the line. And then we did the maths. By year 3, you'll have recovered those costs. So we took a different look at the business. And what we started to do was look at a way of generating inbound rather than creating outbound and all of the things that went with it. It made the entire business far more efficient. It made my time far more efficient. It made people in the business feel far more valued, and equally increased their productivity. So again, I think, the word keeps cropping up, is ego. You've got to take it out of the equation if you really do want to move the business forward. You're starting off a business, the one thing that you need an awful lot of is ego, gut, determination to keep it moving forward. But, the brightest and the best leaders that I've met understand at what stage to start stepping, not necessarily back. You understand your business, so you can keep a close eye on things. But equally, if you're not disrupting your business internally, I guarantee that somebody externally will do it for you. So you'll become the brightest guy out of a job and out of a business in the market.
Wow. I'm speechless, which I think, as you both probably can tell, it's a very tough, it takes a lot to get me to that point. There's so many takeaways here. I know I'm going to go back here, re-listen to this entire thing and take down extraordinary levels of notes, because I know that the amount of implementation, the takeaways that we've covered here today are, there's gold, as they say, in them there hills. There's some very, very deep veins of gold that can be mined with what was just shared. So I just want to take a moment and thank both of you for joining us here on this today. If you were able to, I guess, summarize some of these takeaways, and I don't know, maybe boil it down into 1, 2, or 3, just actionable items that you would tell SME owners. And I know that there's not a one size, for everybody, but I think some of these big principles that we've covered today. Would you be able to maybe just give the SME owner or operator something that he or she can take to the bank today and put into action?
So organic growth starts with what you've already got. It's far more efficient to leverage organic growth based on either innovating what you're already doing or maybe repositioning what you're already doing. It all comes from where you've already invested your time and your effort, but recognizing that what worked for you yesterday won't necessarily work for you tomorrow. And those people that keep a very close eye on behavior, not their competition, by the way. There's the other thing that I see a lot of people doing. They spend far too much time looking at what the competition's doing. If you obsess on a daily basis with what your potential customers are doing and their behavior, so 15 years ago, there was a lot more, in my world, a lot more people visiting physical retail stores. There was a lot of people using mail order. But behavior moved them all online. And what you're seeing now as a fallout of COVID is a lot of those businesses have had their demise accelerated as a result of the fact that they really sort of put off some of those behavioral changes. So, work with what you've got, sweat those assets, leverage your change makers, drop the ego, and start to think about what it is that your products can do for other sectors and other markets that you've not currently tapped into.
Pace of change in the world that we're living in right now, whilst it creates a challenge, it obviously creates an opportunity. And I think what we need to think about within our businesses is, how does that affect our customer? And in a sense, that's what I tried to do with Exit Valhalla, because our customer, our client is the owner manager of a business. And 25 years ago, owner managers used to find their advisors probably in the restaurant, their local restaurant, or their local golf club, or they were introduced by a friend, but it was probably a one-to-one personal meeting. Whereas I think now, because of advances in technology, people are much more open to getting this kind of advice and consultancy online. Frank Kern's demonstrated that already in the US, and we're looking to develop that process, that product offering, if you like, that service offering that he's offering, and broaden it out a bit more. We utilize the skills and experience we've got around growing businesses and preparing them for exit, which Stephen said, every SME owner manager at the end of the day has the dream to create the optimal exit. So that's what we're about.
Guys, well, phenomenal. I just wanted to say, first of all, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for adding so much relevant value, carving the time out of your day to be here. I really look forward to our next podcast together. And Stephen, I hope we can rope you in some time for another one here as well. Two things, guys. The first one is go to exitvalhalla.com to learn more about how you can begin preparing your SME for a very successful exit. It's something needs to be done. Just like Mike has said, this is not a 3 to 6 month game. This is a 12 to 18 month game. Be strategic, partner with someone like Mike and his partner Ken to be able to really make this a reality. And I will link to both Mike and to Stephen's LinkedIn down in the description below. Hook up with them, connect with them there, drop them a line, tell them how much this has added value to you, and if it's a good fit for them, ask them if you can do business with them as well. So, guys, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the time. Best of luck to everybody out there.